They are called humanitarians.
Never give in. Never, never, never.
Defined as one who promotes human welfare.
A man dies when he refuses to stand up for that which is right.
And social reform.
I would have to know once and for all what rights I had as a human being.
On this day, we unveil an historic piece of work. A vision executed by the hands of artists, honoring 25 men, women, and a child. KTVU presents Remember Them, Champions for Humanity.
We are walking among giants of humanitarians in the studio of artist Mario Chiodo. He is the Oakland native who is building this monument to honor people who have dedicated their lives to helping others.
And every person Mario Chiodo spotlights, he says, has touched his heart, and now through this vision, he hopes to touch yours. The vision of a sculptor.
I cannot see myself doing anything else, at least as far as my life work.
A man of focus, grace, and determination.
Every sculpture is a new challenge.
His name is Mario Chiodo, his idea born decades ago during his teenage years.
I'm going to make something that could make people feel good or inspire people. I didn't know what that was, but that seed was planted.
And now the seed is growing. Remember them. Champions for Humanity, 60,000 pounds of bronze, 52 feet wide, 27 feet tall. It is a four-piece sculpture highlighting 25 world figures of his choice into one story of hope.
All roads ended up leading here. History and art is sitting in this room.
And it was one moment in recent U.S. history that focused Chiodo's vision.
And I remember thinking, people really must not have any hope to want to take that kind of horrible act.
And so the seed began to blossom. A sketch and then a poster, all driven by a powerful thought.
That no matter what element came in here to try to destroy us, the foundation of this country that was built on will not change.
Chiodo's story started to turn another page.
It's the books that really make you think.
From King to Mandela to Lincoln, the Holocaust, and much more, he read for years, and it's based not on images, but his research. Chiodo began sculpting the facial poses we see today.
It's the story of their life and the triumphs and the tragedies, and especially the transformational times, that give me, anyway, a clue to what these people must have been like, or what did they feel like.
And from small clay sculptors, the faces took shape and grew larger into molds and into bronze. Chiodo says it is a monument capturing the spirit of 25 individuals who sacrificed their lives to help others. It is a symbol of hope he hopes to pass along.
History shows that in spite of difficulties, no matter how difficult it is, people have risen from these terrible atrocities to do better.
It takes a lot of different types of materials to build a monument. Tens of thousands of pounds of bronze, clay, rubber, all used to solidify Chiodo's art for the generations. In fact, the majority of the material actually used in this project will be recycled, all molded together by an army of artists who have been working passionately for nearly a decade.
It is such an enormous project. It is a large piece of art. Mario is still the lead sculptor. He art directs every step of the way, but he has to have assistance because there's just such a massive amount of work that needs to go on, just assembling the largeness of it.
So right now, Richard and Ben are working on the bottom half of section 4 of the monument. The whole thing is covered with many layers of paint. The paint is important because that's what allows the clay to stick to it. And then that clay is the final material that is worked on by the sculptors. That's how we get all of the detail in the faces. That's how we capture the expressions in each of the individual humanitarians on the monument.
I'm making a smaller scale model of Mother Teresa's head, and it will go on the visually impaired wall so that they can have some experience of the giant monument by having something to touch. Mario wants to make the monument to inspire people, and he wants to include anybody possible, and so it's nice for people who can't be visually inspired by looking at the monument to actually have something to experience and participate in.
What Bart is doing right now is applying vegetable shortening to the rubber before we put the plaster on. That's so the plaster will separate from the rubber more easily. The mold has to break apart so that we can remove it from the sculpture. The labeling is really important because it's a huge puzzle, and once we take all the sections apart and deliver them to the foundry, they cast wax inside our molds and cast the head separately in bronze and then weld it back together. So it's kind of a crazy way to do things, but it's working for us.
When we get the mold from Mario, we are the last in the process. There's still a lot to grind over here. It's a challenging piece because it's very big, and to make it to come together, it's not an easy, because you're starting from different sides. You don't never know when you come to pull it all together how well it's going to fit.
This is where it turns into metal. We're going to melt the bronze. I'm doing that now. We're preparing the molds. I like fire. I like low frequency rumbles. I like the intensity of it. It'd be about 2100 degrees Fahrenheit.
The best part that I have is when everybody's gone and I walk around and I look at the art. I spend hours and hours after work just to do that.
Maya Angelou once said that all great achievements require time, but she is a woman who knows great achievements also require sacrifice.
I've seen her do all sorts of things to support those things that she thinks are right and are just.
Maya Angelou's gift is in her written word. Through poetry, literature, theater, and education, she continues to leave her mark.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll arise.
It was on the streets of San Francisco that Maya Angelou first learned what it meant to be a pioneer. At the age of 14, she became the first female African-American cable car conductor. At 17, just after high school graduation, she became a single mom to Guy Johnson. Back in 1961, when Guy was just 16, he learned about strength, about what it means to stand up for what you believe in, even if it means standing in the path of mounted patrols during a march, even if it means standing alone.
And I pulled on my mother and I said, "Ma, come on, the police are coming." She turned to me and said, "I have to tell you, Hendrix," she said to me, "one person standing on the word of God is the majority." I thought she was crazy. The level of courage, she had it.
In the years since, Angelou has worked with Malcolm X, marched with Martin Luther King Jr. She has received Grammys, dozens of honorary degrees, even a Presidential Medal of Arts, and she continues to write. She wrote poems for the inaugurations of 2 presidents and has spoken out on subjects that both move her and devastate her.
AIDS is cruel. Alas, in the most intimate times between human beings, it intrudes.
It was Angelou's son who first heard of the Remember Them project and who brought his mother to see that work underway.
When she came out, I took her down there, and I think she embraced it wholeheartedly.
Angelou has written that history, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Artist Mario Chiodo has done that in Oakland, molding his dream, in part, into her image. Angelo's son says in this he sees both humanitarian and mother.
Here's a person who reached out to other human beings and helped them be human and helped them find their way.
Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the hope and the dream of the slave. And so, naturally, there I go rising.
We must make our hearts instruments of peace and nonviolence, because when the heart is right, the mind and the body will follow.
Sunrise in the Central Valley, south to Kern County and into the town of Delano, where there is religion, agriculture, stories of hope.
When I was working in the fields, I used to say, gosh, I wonder when they're going to pay, not 50 cents, but maybe $1.
And stories of Chavez.
He says the day Cesar Chavez died, that's the day I quit working in the fields.
When any person suffers for someone in greater need, that person is a human. Those are the words of Cesar Chavez, words that are still dear to many residents here in the Central Valley town of Delano. It is a town where it all began for Chavez, where he organized and where his name still echoes throughout many of the fields. It's called 40 acres. A plot of land along the Garces Highway and the birthplace of what is now the United Farm Workers of America. On the land is one cluster of buildings called the Village, and within the Village is room 37. Vice President of the UFW, Armando Elenis.
You know what? Actually, I've never come in this room first time.
Inside, a crucifix, a bed, a water pitcher, and little else. It is where Chavez publicly fasted twice.
There's a lot of history, and it's also, it's kind of hard to see something when you see somebody go through that.
Through hunger strikes and other nonviolent tactics, great boycotts, pickets, and marches, Chavez had a goal: to bring national attention to the struggles of migrant farm workers, from better pay to safer working conditions.
He was real nice person.
Friendly Delano faces from his past tell part of his story. Pauly Cardona Pasillas, then and now. Porfirio Borrell, then and now. Both say Cesar Chavez sacrificed his life for others. And both were there on April 29, 1993, the last march with Chavez. The body of Chavez was carried in a plain pine coffin built by his brother, closed by his nephew.
It came time to close the casket. It's hard to do.
Federico Chavez has many memories of his uncle and his legacy, and that legacy giving people the knowledge about the power of nonviolence using, quote, moral jiu-jitsu, he says, against a more powerful enemy.
If you're willing to put your all into it, you can change the circumstances that are keeping you oppressed.
Chavez says his uncle would often say, if you want to remember me, organize. No parks, no statues, just organize. But to be remembered in bronze with 24 other humanitarians,
It's meaningful to me. I've always thought that he was, a special person because he was my uncle and all that. But for it to be recognized in that way, is meaningful.
Cesar Estrada Chavez, a prophet to the poor and the migrant, always watching over the Central Valley of California.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
What you figure out at this stage is where's all the masses, and then how are the shadows and the and the highlight's going to hit the figure. So we're trying to capture him right at the height of the Depression and trying to have that contemplation of you know, how do I resolve this unbelievable problem? And then the eyes are done last. The eyes is what ties everything together. You have to make sure that when the viewer's looking at it, that's what they look at more than anything. Everything focuses on the eyes. I've got just grab some clay. I've always loved any kind of art I could get my hands on, but I was not a particularly good elementary school kid. I was kind of bored and uninterested. And then when I was about 11 years old, I was part of an experiment with the late Marcus Foster, who's the superintendent of schools. They sat me in a room and they said, here's a plunk of clay, you got to do something with it, but we're not going to tell you what to do with it. And I ended up making this head of a bearded man, and it was like the greatest moment of my life, because everything I'm doing now goes back to that. And then about a month afterwards, they said, now do you want to learn mathematics through art and history through art? And for the first time, I said yes. And how many of you think you can do stuff like this? Oh, come on. Well, rather, let me ask you, how many of you would like to do things like this? Okay, see, that's easier. And I use that same format, and the idea is to reach to kids to the inner city, so that if they understand their creative power that they have.
There's so much detail.
When you're creating things, you're not destroying things. So that's really the whole concept behind all of this, is to find that inner power, and then how does that relate to yourself and to the world, and how you can make positive change.
"14-year-old Alex Bajorge Castro says he considers himself an artist, and he has found inspiration here in Oakland.
They were so amazing, and they were beautiful, they were creative. I couldn't believe it, he could do all of that. I was so inspired by him.
These sculptures of humanitarians highlight extraordinary lives, but are of people who started out in situations and worlds that teens like Alex can understand.
Many of these humanitarians did not start out as global humanitarians. They started out with a situation in their communities that wasn't right, and they felt they had to do something about it. And that is as simple a place for our own students to see their own power.
Alex's journey is still evolving. As a teen in East Oakland, he already knows struggles, but he is also learning about success.
I wasn't very good at math ever since, and now I'm starting to improve math.
A couple of years ago, Alex was struggling with a 2.5 GPA. Today, the 8th grader is turning things around.
He just came up to me yesterday and was really excited about his 3.25 he got on his report card, which is a huge improvement for him.
Alex's teachers, Dana Chiklis and Stephen Smith, say that turnaround has not been easy, especially when you consider the other challenges life brings these kids.
For a lot of my students, every day is a struggle. They see violence every day and submitted to a lot of injustice.
The Oakland Unified School District is embracing the Remember Them project. The district's curriculum will soon include lessons on these 25 humanitarians. It is history taught through art.
The kids who need art the most are totally deprived of it.
It starts very simply for Alex. A marker is his brush, a piece of paper his canvas, his muse from within.
I'm being myself by drawing.
And in his art, he sees not only who he is, but also who he can be. This is the iconic image of the nameless Tiananmen Square protester who stood courageously in front of a line of military tanks in 1989. It is this image that has become the definitive symbol of civil resistance, and is the pursuit of human rights that serves as the common thread that binds all 25 of these humanitarians. Harvey Milk's smile still welcomes visitors to City Hall. His passion made history here. His contributions still resonate.
What I'm going to do is call upon the gay community to come out now, keep the education going.
It was in City Hall Harvey Milk made history as the city's first openly gay elected official.
He loved this building. He loved the beauty of the building. He loved the symbolism of it.
But it was also here in 1978, after just 11 months in office, that it all came to a violent end. Harvey Milk and Mayor George Moscone were both shot and killed by Supervisor Dan White.
Both Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk have been shot and killed.
On that day, Harvey Milk's moment in history came to an end, and the weight of that was crushing.
I felt that way through the afternoon, and then in the evening as the sun set, people began to gather at the corner of Castro and Market Street. Hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands.
In that silent sea of candlelight that filled the streets of San Francisco, there is a lesson to be learned. Harvey Milk changed history. At the GLBT History Museum in San Francisco, there is memorabilia and photos, and there's this table. Harvey Milk sat at this table in his kitchen a year before his death, and he made a tape.
This is to be played only in the event of my death by assassination.
It was also so Harvey. I was aware of the tape because I used to tease him about it. I used to tell him that he wasn't important enough to be assassinated.
In his last words, Harvey Milk said this movement was all about hope. Hope for a better world and hope for a better tomorrow.
I wish I had time to explain everything I did. Almost everything was done in the eyes of the gay movement.
It took 12 years and $3 million to build the Abraham Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. 27 years and an estimated $120 million for the new Martin Luther King Memorial, also in D.C. Nearly 10 years in the making, Remember Them, Champions for Humanity, is projected to cost $7.9 million. It will be installed this September in a place that has undergone its own transformation, West Oakland. Today, it's thriving with new restaurants. You know how to do it. Viva Oakland. And live entertainment. In the heart of this renaissance in Henry J. Kaiser Park will be the home of the Remember Them monument.
Most of our wonderful cities in the world are filled with art, and art attracts people.
Oakland Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce President Joe Haraberta has been one of the chief architects in bringing the monument to Oakland, one he hopes will be more than just another art attraction, but a permanent reminder of what these 25 individuals worked for.
Every person that comes to visit the monument, in recognizing that we would not be where we are today but for the sacrifices made by many of these individuals.
The four-piece bronze monument will be placed at the Henry J. Kaiser Memorial Park this coming September for everyone to enjoy.
It is one for the ages, built in bronze, designed to educate and honor generations of humanitarians. And for every humanitarian being honored, a new generation is being born.